We're actively telling people that it's going to kill them and kill their families, which is like, interesting marketing strategy from some of the AI labs. I think at the end of the day, like, I think we need to show that you can use advanced technology, you can use AI and robotics to save lives. You can focus on some of the most important problems that humanity has, and you can do it in a way that fundamentally transform everybody's lives. Save time, save money, save lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MTS. Today, I am joined by Keller Cliffton, who is the co-founder and CEO of Zipline, the autonomous delivery company that began by delivering blood and medical supplies in Rwanda and now operates healthcare, food, and retail delivery networks in the United States. And earlier today, Zipline and Uber announced plans to bring autonomous drone deliveries to Uber Eats with an eventual goal of reaching 1 million deliveries every day. So, Keller, so excited to have you on MTS.
Thank you for having me.
Well, great place to start would just be with today's announcement. Can you share a little bit about what was announced and why now?
We announced this new strategic partnership with Uber to get to 1 million deliveries a day. Important to realize that's actually still a very small percentage of the total instant deliveries happening in the US today, let alone the fact that Dara and I both are confident that delivering in a way that's 10 times faster and less expensive is ultimately going to lead to a big expansion of this overall market. In fact, if you were to just look at the customer ordering behavior that Zipline is observing right now across the cities where we operate, if you were to extend that to the rest of the US, there will be 10 times as many instant deliveries. So we expect to go from about 5 billion instant deliveries a year to about 50 billion instant deliveries a year in the US alone. So there's an opportunity to grow the market by 10x. There's not only that, but I think when you look at instant delivery, the reality is we're kind of using technology that's 100 years old, right? Which is like a human driving a car to solve a problem that or a customer need that we've only really well understood over the last decade. And so we think that ultimately, if you reason from first principles, it's obvious why if you're delivering something that weighs 5 pounds or 10 pounds, you probably want to do that with a vehicle that is electric and autonomous and a vehicle that weighs 50 pounds rather than 4,000 pounds.
Definitely. So what does that distribution specifically unlock for Zipline? What's something that it unlocks that maybe you couldn't have done as quickly on your own?
Well, I mean, a couple big things, right? Uber obviously has tens of millions of loyal customers, and this means that Zipline's service, this kind of teleportation-like service, is now going to be rolled out to all of those customers so that they can experience it for themselves. Also, Uber works with, I think, 1.4 million merchants and small businesses, something on that order. And so not only enabling for each of those businesses, because Zipline can deliver out to, the system, the technology that we build is designed to deliver out to a 10-mile range, which is way more than is economic to make deliveries using cars. And so for this reason, from any given restaurant or merchant, you can reach about 10 times as many customers via instant delivery as you could before. So it creates a lot of value for those merchants. And also, all of those merchants are now going to be available on the Zipline app as well. So it's just, huge. Hopefully, this has a big impact in helping Uber grow Uber Eats, which is actually the biggest portion of their business at this point by bookings and revenue. But also this, adding all of this selection and all these amazing brands are going to help Zipline grow our own app and provide an amazing experience to these restaurants.
Yeah, I'm also curious because you guys have been working on autonomous delivery for years. And is there a specific technical problem that had to be solved before you could get all of this infrastructure out in, the main public's adoption?
I think the hardest thing, I think this is probably a general lesson for robotics in general, but it's very easy early on when you're kind of imagining trying to build a new technology. It's very easy to get focused on like the core thing. And in this case, it would have been like the aircraft. Like, how do we build a really high performance aircraft? And the hardest lessons we learned in the first 5 years of operating this system at scale outside the US were that the aircraft is only 15% of the complexity overall solution. And this is something, by the way, when I was spending time with Dara, I realized, for obvious reasons, they just completely get this fundamental idea, which is actually the vast majority of the challenge is in integration, in the integrating auxiliary software and metrics and operations, maintenance, manufacturing, supply chain, charging sites, all this stuff that we're having to do across many different metros in the US. There's just a huge amount of complexity that you don't necessarily think of when you just think of, drone delivery. Okay, cool. I need a cool drone, and then it's going to work. So There's so much that goes into these integrating operational layers. And I think that, it just took a long time. I mean, that's the reality. I think, people hear about the hype cycle curve, right? Where you have like the early excitement and then the full on hype. And then you have like the crash and then the trough of disillusionment. And then usually, 8 to 10 years of hard work to actually build something of value. I think you saw this cycle play out very accurately for autonomous cars. And I think you also saw this cycle play out for drone delivery. And, the reality is, well after the hype cycle came and went, you then had 10 years of like building all of these auxiliary layers and integrating software systems that were necessary to actually make this thing work in the real world in a way that's super reliable. Zipline now has 140 million commercial autonomous miles and 0 safety incidents. And it was only, awarded regulatory permission to fly in the US after 10 years of operating these systems at scale outside the US.
Before we dive in, I want to shout out our sponsor, Lovable. You know, the app you've been meaning to build, the internal tool, side project, or product you'd otherwise lose a weekend to? With Lovable, you get software you can ship today. That includes an editable codebase you can inspect and change, plus two-way GitHub sync. Lovable also handles the backend and infrastructure, including managed Postgres, auth, storage, hosting, payments, and more, so you don't have to wire it all up yourself. And through Lovable's MCP server, you can create and deploy your project directly from the agents you already use. Turn ideas into software people love with Lovable. Lovable.dev. Now, onto the episode. How were you able to get it so complacent? So how were you able to make sure that you don't have none of those safety incidents? How did you ensure the reliability of these autonomous drones?
I think nothing is easy when it comes to hardware reliability. Zipline build, has a huge hardware test and reliability team. We have a huge safety and huge safety team, and then we also do a huge amount of work in terms of testing new software releases at the company. As part of this building where I'm standing right now, I'm in Zipline's autonomous aircraft factory. This building is capable of producing 20 to 35,000 of these aircraft a year, which is about enough to get us to like 1.5 million deliveries a day. So, one big takeaway from this partnership with Uber is like, we got to massively expand the factory. But in this building is our entire hardware testing lab, our vibe chamber, our wind tunnels. There are 700 unique components on the aircraft, almost all of which are designed from scratch by Zipline, 43 major sub-assemblies on the aircraft. And that's just the aircraft, not to mention ground infrastructure, the towers, the drop boxes, which are sort of the integrating mailboxes that we set up with all these different businesses. The dock. There's a lot of different hardware products that go into this kind of ecosystem to enable autonomous logistics to work. All of those are manufactured here in the factory, and all of them are tested to failure through, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of, equivalent hours of testing to try to find failures here before we ship hardware into the real world.
What does it actually look like when it comes to regulation for autonomous drones? What permission do you actually have to get to operate it at scale?
You can think of it as like a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of companies that were able to go much faster, at least get launched in the US faster. You could think of the scooter companies, for example, because they were only regulated by, the cities or the municipalities where they were launching. One of the challenges with that is you are dealing with a different regulator in every township or city that you launch in. One of the, I would say, a challenge early on was that there is one federal regulator for the entire United States airspace. That is the FAA. For many years, the FAA wanted to see a lot more data that would prove to them these kinds of systems could be operated at scale commercially in a way that was sufficiently safe. And the way Zipline gathered all that data was by going and focusing on life-saving use cases outside the US. We scaled a system to the point where, today we're serving 5,000 hospitals and health facilities across Africa, saving 17,000 lives a year. It took years to get that system to the level of reliability, safety that was ultimately required to then bring it back to the US and say, hey, here's this massive amount of safety data showing you that it's ready. And, but the advantage now is like having passed through that gauntlet, Zipline now has permission to, because it's one big federal regulator, Zipline now has permission to fly beyond visual line of sight autonomously throughout the entire United States in all 50 states.
Wait, so what was the specific safety data that the FAA needed before it approved everything?
The Zipline was actually really responsible for building like our safety case because this was unprecedented. So it's not like there was a clear safety bar that had been set of like, oh yeah, here's what drone delivery is going to need to achieve. It was a conversation with the FAA partnership to say, well, this is a brand new kind of technology that we've never seen before. What level of safety do we think would be required? And Zipline was always really, really pushing to basically be able to say, look, we need to be 10 times as safe as cars, because cars are really the thing that we are, the most direct comparison for the use cases that Zipline is focused on. And just looking at the specific data, 140 million miles, that's like if you were to drive every single road in the United States 30 times. And if you were to drive 140 million miles, you would have about 600 accidents, 100 injuries, and 2 to 6 fatalities, depending on what country you were in. Zipline has 0 accidents, 0 injuries, 0 fatalities. And so, yeah, our goal was 10 times safer than cars. So far, we are beating that goal. And that is, I think, a rough way of thinking about like the safety bar that is going to be required for this technology to scale in a place like the US.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about is something you alluded to at the start of our conversation. You were talking about 1 million deliveries, but the reality is that the market is a lot larger than that. And say, once this works at scale, the market could be predicted to be even larger and larger than it is now. And so I'm curious how you actually predict consumer behavior to change after all of this technology works.
Well, the cool thing is we actually don't have to predict it, because at this point we're operating, at metro scale in a couple of big cities in the US. And so we are seeing it. I spent time with a dad of 5 kids who's ordering like 1 to 2 times from Zipline every day, and has been doing so for a year and a half since we opened. Has ordered many hundreds of times from Zipline in the last year. You meet 80-year-old grandmas who are like living on the Zipline app and totally depending on it. You meet college kids. I tweeted a video today that I just found to be kind of hilarious. It's like a sort of out of control video of like the 7th floor pool roof deck of a dorm where they're having a pool party. They're basically having a massive pool party on the 7th floor of this apartment building. It's and this frat party, they are having Zipline deliveries directly to the side of the pool. And so it's like, think about that. It's these kinds of deliveries are actually way more convenient. Like it's hard to, for someone else to deliver directly to the 7th floor of a building.
Yeah.
And so, we are already seeing the data. And actually, I think one of the best analogies for this kind of like changing the user behavior is Uber. When Uber was early on focused on rideshare, they were scaling in San Francisco. And I remember investors were saying, hey, even if Uber becomes 50% of the taxi market in San Francisco, it's only going to be a $20 billion company. And obviously what they totally missed is that today Uber is 10 times the size of the taxi market in San Francisco. If you design a service that's better, people start using it in totally different ways to do different things than they were using taxis. People didn't commute to work back and forth in taxis, at least not very often in San Francisco, whereas it's normal with Uber. So I think exactly the same thing going on here. If you can make instant delivery 10 times faster, less expensive, reliable, and a really magical customer experience, people are going to use a lot more of it. And that's what we're seeing in the customer data.
Definitely. How Uber completely changed consumer behavior. Zipline is doing the same thing. I had a question for you because I was really inspired by the work that Zipline did in Rwanda. And I was curious to just better understand you personally. What motivated you and what was the specific problem you were trying to solve?
When we started the company, our backgrounds were in automation and robotics and software. And it seemed to us like we had this simple idea, which was that, it should be, we had seen all these kind of like warehouse automation products that could like move things around inside a warehouse autonomously. And we just had this simple thought, well, someone's going to build that for outside the warehouse. And that would be like so important. If you could automate logistics, if you could, you can build the first logistics system that serves all people equally. And, I now have a flag over my desk that says we do this not because it is easy, but because we thought that it would be easy. And, this is definitely like the definition of Zipline. It's like, as a 23 or 24-year-old with this like totally naive notion of like, oh yeah, we could just build autonomous logistics. It turns out it was a lot harder than we were expecting. It's taken longer than we were expecting. It took more money than we were expecting. But, something I was just telling the Zipline team in our all hands today, despite all those things, the idea also wound up being about 1,000 times bigger than we were expecting. Like the opportunity is so much bigger than we could have guessed 5 or 10 years ago.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I think things are harder. They take longer. I think a certain amount of naivete is required. But I think these, when a fundamental idea like this starts working, I think it can work in a very, very big way. And I think you can see growth over the course of like several decades. It's sort of hard to imagine at the very beginning.
Definitely. We don't do it because it's easy. We do it because we thought it was easy. Getting that tattooed.
Exactly.
That's so funny. My last question for you, what is the world you're trying to build?
I mean, I grew up reading all kinds of, classic science fiction. I was a bookworm. I was also, probably kind of a weirdo who didn't care that much about what other people thought. And I think that Zipline, connects to both of those things. We were told that this idea was stupid. It was never going to work. We were wasting our time. People would be confused. They're like, oh, isn't Zipline just some NGO operating in Africa? It's not a real business. It's not investable. And keep in mind, what we were doing was also illegal in the United States for the first 10 years that we were building the company. And so there were a lot of reasons to not build this company. I think that, the reality is we wanted to work on something that felt like, a sci-fi version of the future that we were promised as kids. And we also felt like, technology in many different ways gets a bad rap these days, right? Either because it's like only serving rich people, or because we're actively telling people that it's going to kill them and kill their families, which is like, interesting marketing strategy from some of the AI labs, I think. At the end of the day, like, I think we need to show that you can use advanced technology, you can use AI and robotics to save lives. You can focus on some of the most important problems that humanity has, and you can do it in a way that is equally available. It's not just available to the richest people on earth. It's actually something that can like fundamentally transform everybody's lives, save time, save money, save lives.
100%. Keller, that is such a beautiful note to end on. Really wanted to thank you for coming on MTS today and sharing more about Zipline during such an exciting announcement. Really love your guys' company. I love that you got to film actually at the factory, and love the mission that you guys are building towards. So really appreciate you for joining us today on MTS.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
A huge thanks to MTS sponsors.
11 Labs, AI that communicates at human level across every channel and modality. 11labs.io/MTS. Scale your startup on Neon. Millions of developers and startups have already chosen Neon for their backend. Start on the free plan or get up to $100,000 in credits for your startup at neon.com/MTS. Special thanks to our sponsor, Kong, the AI connectivity platform. Connect APIs, LLMs, agents, and systems with serious security and governance. KongHQ.com.
Blitzy, autonomous software development for enterprise codebases. Ship 5x faster. Blitzy.com. AdQuick, make your brand a billboard. Out-of-home advertising as easy to scale as digital. AdQuick.com. Arena, measuring AI performance in the real world. Arena.ai.
Support for the show comes from VCX, the public ticker for private tech. The US stock market started history's greatest wave of wealth creation. From factory workers in Detroit to farmers in Omaha, anyone could own a piece of the great American companies. But today, our most innovative companies are staying private longer, which means everyday Americans are missing out. Until now. Introducing VCX, a public ticker for private tech. Visit getvcx.com for more info. That's getvcx.com. Carefully consider the investment material before investing, including objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. This and other information can be found in the Innovations Fund prospectus at getvcx.com. This is a paid sponsorship.